Hello nerds, today is Thursday, April the 18th, 2019, and that means it's time for the 108th game of the Meditation Games. Today's game was made by Antonio Vargas, Camila Castellon, and Claudio Norori. They've left quite a large blurb for us, which I'll read out for you now. In Nicaragua, what began as a peaceful protest back in April 2018 transformed into a crisis due to the brutal police and paramilitary repression imposed by Daniel Ortega, a figure that has stayed 11 consecutive years in office. His absolute control of state and institutional powers, such as the National Army and the police force, has made this possible. So far, more than 400 deaths are reported. Many minors are identified in the list of victims. Raising a Nicaraguan flag is enough to be labelled as a terrorist and a rebel? Serious? What? Any form of manifestation of peaceful protest has been labelled as illegal by the government. The Nicaraguan economy is still falling. Over 600 political prisoners are living in subhuman conditions and being tortured. With this interactive experience, we want to encourage you to talk and get informed about the horrific situation our country is going through. Holy shit! I've generally not even heard of this. That's worrying. Although I do know the name Daniel Ortega. Maybe it has been mentioned. I don't know. That's really weird. But that was years ago. Oh, mind you, 11 consecutive years. Yeah, I guess I would have heard his name. Let's have a look. Well, shit. That's a fucking grim way to set up your to present a game, isn't it? Fucking hell. Oh, hello. Have I killed it? What's going on? Ah, there we go. Excuse me, the AK-47 predominates within the arsenal of weapons used by... Is that scrolling in the background? For God's sake. Used by paramilitary groups and the police. Nicaragua in particular is a country with an increasing number of weapons, disproportionate to the number of police officers and soldiers in active service. The police and paramilitaries sponsored by the government took advantage of this reality. Just all that. Yes, I can read that. Over 400 deaths in a country with a population of 6 million. So wherever you highlight lights up. Can I scroll back and forth, or no? It'd be nice if it held whilst I was reading. I run the risk of missing stuff, and I don't know if I already have. But let's try and get them all. I'll try and read quicker. Barricades were used by protesters to face heavily armed police forces and paramilitary groups. I can't tell. I don't know what that barricade resembles, like what the construction is. I can see like barrels and stuff like that. I assume sandbags, but I don't know. And that's the Nicaraguan flag. Oh wow, hello. Stuff we can interact. Oh Christ, a lot of stuff we can interact with here. Baking soda and water. This is the formula used by protesters to fight tear gas and chemical weapons used by the National Police to disperse masses, which causes instant irritation of the skin, respiratory tract, and can result in temporary permanent damage to eye damage. Cramp. I've missed stuff. Oh, for God's sake. Right, we'll run this again. Improvised shields were used by brave students to face live ammunition. Yeah, I don't want to have to hurry through it, because then it doesn't sound like I'm actually reading it, and yeah. Tell you what, I'll restart it again, and I'll try and keep on top of that. This could be very tricky to put into a gameplay video. Mind you, at least in that you can just pause it, can't you? So, yeah, this is a horrible image. And they're armed with AK-47s, I've just noticed. Oh. That's okay. I thought there was something else I could click on then. I was like, no! I've missed something else again. Okay, let's have a look. I just realised there's like a concrete wall running down the entirety of the road. Is that something they've actually set up there? Okay, so this was about the barricades used by protesters to face heavily armed police forces and paramilitary groups. Baking soda and water, the formula used by protesters to fight tear gas. I can't believe they fucking use tear gas. What's this? Makeshift mortars, at first used to accompany celebrations and manifestations with their rumblings. Later they mortared into a defensive weapon to face live ammunition. Fuck. That's the barricade one. That's the student one, I think, isn't it? Improvised shields. I wonder what that's made out of. Were used by brave students to face live ammunition. That looks like half of a bin? Could be wrong. If it was a bin, that would not have been very effective. School bus. Oh, Christ. With... oh, shit. Fuck's that? Interesting. Oh, wow. So that's a school bus, so they were talking about infant mortalities in what's that flag? I don't recognise that flag, but judging by the fact that it's on the bike, the Nicaraguan flag is not a thing you're allowed to hoist. I assume that's this guy's flag for his regime. Heavily armed paramilitary sponsored by the government roamed the streets during the crisis peak. Their main objective was to spread fear, standing in their way or being in the wrong place at the wrong time, resulting in a cold-blooded shot. Jesus fucking Christ. I can't imagine that. Flag, girder... Oh no, that's one of those trees. Trees of Life, project created in 2013 by the First Lady and now Vice President of Nicaragua, Rosia Murillo. Metal bodies, luminous with a height that reached 20 metres, they formed a false forest with more than 140 structures valued together at a price that exceeds $33 million without including millionaire bills of annual energy consumption. In one of the poorest countries in Latin America, witnessing the useless waste awakens the anger that arises from the need. So during the crisis, protesters decided to work together and topple the symbols of the dictatorship as a sign of liberation. Fuck. Oh. You're Ortega. I don't know what that means. Ortega's obviously the president. Or dictator, I think it's probably more fair to call him, but... Censorship of independent media, with the government-controlled media manipulating the information, the other few means that are not ruled by the government exposing the human rights violations to the world. Censorship intensifies in all news shows on air during the crisis, creating an information blackout of the truth and leaving the internet as the only weapon. Many respected journalists are now in prison. And the static on the screen. Yeah, I get the symbolism they're going for with that. That's quite... I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but... Yeah. Well, yeah. The police keeps hunting anyone who might have been involved in the peaceful manifestations. Over 600 political prisoners. It is widely known that they are being tortured and living in subhuman conditions. What's this? Crosses, flowers, crap. More than 400 people were killed under Ortega's repression tactics. To this day, no police officer or paramilitary has been brought to justice. Ortega is still in power. I assume you are not in Nicaragua at the moment. That's the end of it, yeah. Fuck. Well, that was bloody horrifying, wasn't it? Jesus Christ. So, one obvious point to make is, I wish it stopped whilst I was reading. I guess that's not really the point, is it? The point is the message that it was delivering, and that was a incredibly horrid and brutal message. Like I say, I assume you are not in Nicaragua now, because I imagine that would get you in a lot of shit if you were still there. Like, if they're arresting journalists and torturing them, I hate to think what repercussions you might get for that. I just hope you're safe. I think that's possibly the most harrowing meditation that I've seen so far. There aren't any others that come to mind with that same level of absolute horror. Yeah, fuck. That's really throw me through a loop a bit, won't lie. So, there's two things that this game has taught me. One, holy shit. It's horrifying that shit like that still happens. Like, I know it still happens. I do hear about it. But that leads me to point number two. We hear so little about it. So little of it is talked about. So little of it is discussed. Generally, Africa, the Middle East, and South America, by and large, kind of ignored. And it's fucking sickening, actually. It's... Christ, yeah. It galls me that I've heard so much about so many civil unrest, civil uprisings around the world. I don't even know where they are. I'm sure the news told me, briefly, when it cared. And that's kind of on me as well. I didn't look it up. I've not tried to learn more about it. I honestly do try to avoid the news in general, just because it's not a fun time. It's just bad news and people doing shit, and it's horrible. But yeah, something like that. It doesn't sit right with me that I have turned a blind eye to it. So genuinely, thank you for making that game and sharing it. So it raises awareness of what the fuck's going on there. And second, it's admittedly a pretty needed shake-up for me to kind of think, yeah, because like I said, I try to avoid this stuff. It makes me uncomfortable, it makes me sad. Of course I'm going to want to avoid it, but that's not right. So, yeah, I appreciate that. So let's talk about happier things. Let's talk about the game that Claudio is making. So the game is called Artico, and I don't know how to best describe it. Well, maybe I do. So it looks like it is a survival and an exploration game set in the Arctic. You can navigate around the big white wasteland with your dog sleigh, and you can now also pet the dogs, which is a fantastic update. I can't tell a huge amount of what's going on in the game at the moment, but it is actually in early access at the moment, so maybe there's not a huge amount of stuff going on in there yet. But it's an interesting idea, and it looks really nice at the moment. The reviews so far have been very positive for it, so looks like they're going along the right track. It looks interesting. I'm curious to see where this game goes. So I'll leave a link below to Claudio's Twitter and to the Steam store page for Artico. I would link the other Twitter accounts of the other contributors, but I can't find them. So, yeah, it's just going to have to be Claudio, I'm afraid. So a huge thank you to Antonio, Camila, and Claudio for making today's meditation, and thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.